Robinhood's stock price is up over 230% in the last year. I believe that this run is going to continue, and let me tell you guys why I think that Robinhood's next stop in the next year is over $100 per share. Starting with their acquisition of Bitstamp, which they paid roughly $200 million in cash for, they're already receiving about $95 million in revenue over the last 12 months. Okay, meaning they paid roughly a 2 times price to sales ratio. Now, I'll go over more details, but just to put this into perspective, Robinhood themselves is trading roughly around an 18 times price to sales ratio. Now, I mean, there's reasons for that. Robinhood is growing immensely and at very great margins, bringing their rule of 40, okay? A margin that whenever you combine both their total year-over-year revenue growth and their adjusted EBITDA margin should be roughly around 40%, showing off a very strong business. Well, Robinhood actually succeeded those 40% margins on both of those individual marks, bringing that total rule of 40 to 111%. Now, Bitstamp's not making any sort of rule of 40 anywhere near this, but it's important to understand how Robinhood makes a lot of their money. I mean, the fastest growing segment that they have is in transactional revenue, and within that, you're looking at crypto being the fastest growing segment amongst the transactional revenue. So the fastest of the fastest categories for them. Bitstamp also is serving over 500,000 funded retail customers and about 5,000 funded institutional clientele. And currently, Robinhood doesn't have any institutional clientele, so that'll be a completely new revenue line for them. But if we were to assume their same level of growth in accounts, roughly 500,000 quarter over quarter, including an extra 500,000 funded accounts, would bring the total Robinhood account size to 26.8 million in Q2 of 2025. Now, they say here that Bitstamp's exchange volume is mostly institutional, which is important to understand, but it's not unlike what we've seen from other crypto businesses. If we look at Coinbase really quickly, what you can see is that the trading volume is heavily, 80% in line with being institutional volume, okay? But yet, whenever you look at the take rates of what they have between retail and institutional, it's still heavily favored, way more expensive for retail to trade on Coinbase than it is in this small line down here for institutional. Meaning that whenever you look at Coinbase's transactional revenue, although the volume is heavily institutional, the large bulk of it still comes from retail. And I mean 87%. So still the large bulk of Bitstamp's revenue, I'm going to suspect also comes from those 500,000 retail customers, but we don't have that deep knowledge just yet. It's also important to note that Robinhood is acquiring a company that's not really doing much for their bottom line. I mean, it's actually going to cost Robinhood an additional $65 million while also not adding anything to their adjusted EBITDA. So adjusted EBITDA neutral means that if we are bringing on more potential revenue, but not bringing anything to adjusted EBITDA side, this actually potentially poses worse margins for Robinhood in the short term, especially if you're going to continue to add on $65 million more in operating expenses. But ladies and gentlemen, this is what Robinhood does best. Incremental adjusted EBITDA margins of 82%. We want to get into Bitstamp, trim the fat, and make sure that we can actually make much more money than what they were able to do on their own circumstances. Not only that, but potentially offer better user experience and better interface as well, so then customers are actually using the platform more often. But even for now, the products that Bitstamp is able to bring over to Robinhood is even more exciting. See, with Robinhood's 25.8 million users, if they're able to add on a function that was bringing in a lot of money to 500,000 users, but bring that same scalable technology over to 25.8 million users, that could obviously be a much larger product, actually over 50 times larger if you're operating with the same level of cross-sell to a larger audience. The products I'm referring to are things like crypto staking or potentially even crypto lending, where they can make a ton of money and also add additional services that traditional Robinhood users have not been used to. But we also have things like advanced trader tools that could also lend well and add on to things like Robinhood Legend as well. But it's really a mix of all these things. One, I love the fact that they have 100 crypto assets or even 50 licenses and registrations for us to continue to go out and offer Robinhood's products to those new markets. But also look at this, 5+ million customers. What 5+ million customers? We just acquired this business and we know that there's 500,000 customers. See, Bitstamp is one of the longest and oldest crypto exchanges that is still on the map today. But that doesn't mean that they've been a smashing success. Obviously, Coinbase and Kraken and Gemini have done way better over their times being exchanges than what Bitstamp has because the valuation is much, much lower. But that doesn't mean that they can't bring these customers back with things like their incentive matching. See, they did this with Robinhood Retirement with 3% bonuses, and it was an absolute smashing success. And now they're starting to do it even with crypto at a 1% deposit match to start to see how successful this will be. Potentially, if it is, this could win back a lot of customers back to Bitstamp if they also know that there's new potential with Robinhood being a part of the company, increasing the user experience and potentially just being better than other alternatives. But really, the expansion here is the global licenses and all of the different markets that Robinhood will be able to enter. See, you can go all the way down the list from Canada, Italy, France, Luxembourg, Slovenia, Spain, the Netherlands, USA, and the UK. It's just a massive amount of areas that, currently Bitstamp operates in that Robinhood will be able to follow suit. Not to mention also go after institutional clientele in all of those areas, bringing the Robinhood approach to an area that potentially they have not quite entered yet. But then I read this article. WonderFi's Bybit announces acquisition of Bitstamp's Canadian clients. So a potential license that Bitstamp already has in Canada potentially has lost a lot of their clientele to an acquisition from another company called WonderFi. Well, Robinhood acquired them too. They didn't want their customers going away from Bitstamp and said, hey, let's buy up another company as well. They can afford it. They've got a ton of cash still after all these acquisitions, $4.6 billion in cash still. And as rates potentially continue to climb down for the rest of the year, Robinhood is not going to want to sit on billions and billions of dollars in cash. They're going to want it in markets where they can potentially make more on the return and return on invested capital than they would on, cash sitting for 4% or 5%, something like this. And WonderFi is a pretty interesting business. If you take a look at their 2024 numbers, remember this is in Canadian dollars, and I will actually translate this into US dollars here in a minute, but they're up 108% for 2023 full year revenue to 2024. They also have other exciting parts of their business that we'll look into as well, but they're a pretty growing business and also profitable. They also have corporate clientele, high net worth individuals, and very fast growing products that they also have. And they're also trying to expand international into areas that potentially even, Bitstamp is not going after, like Australia. Anytime I say that this is WonderFi's market or this is Bitstamp's market, think of these now as Robinhood's markets. Overall, in the blue, you can see the volatility of Robinhood's overall crypto markets, right? In 2024, we saw a massive explosion in earnings. And now, if we were to look back on the 2024 earnings for both Bitstamp and WonderFi, you can kind of see how much added revenue this would have brought to Robinhood if they have acquired these companies earlier. Either way, Robinhood on their own grew by 363% year over year. Okay. Other companies like WonderFi also grew by over 100% year over year, but you can see the difference in the quality of growth that Robinhood is able to bring on their own versus the companies that they just acquired. If you can now acquire businesses that do have the potential to have triple digit growth rates, imagine what the cost of those acquisitions at 2 times price to sales ratios are going to do years from now as they continue to expand their audience, add on new functionality, and bring in new international markets from these purchases of different crypto businesses. And from the summary of the acquisition of WonderFi from Robinhood, it doesn't look like they're just looking at crypto for these businesses. They said, investment dealer licenses allow us to operate as a regulated crypto platform in Canada with flexibility to increase product offerings subject to regulatory approval. Well, what do they mean by flexibility to increase public offerings? Well, WonderFi might already have the answer. See, they said that they want to go after multi-asset trading. See, things like equities, indices, commodities, and even foreign exchange, and they want to have that finished subject to regulatory approval by second half of 2025. That's essentially a month from now. And I'm pretty certain that this is exactly what they're going for, so much so that the own CEO of Robinhood, Vlad Tenev, tweeted at me saying, hey, you remember whenever you asked me when we're coming to Canada? Well, take a look at this. Well, I can download the Robinhood wallet today in Canada. That's not exactly what I think that he's meaning. I think that they're talking about a wide breadth of products like equities, options, cryptocurrency, the full 9 yards of what we're actually seeing already in the United Kingdom. See, Robinhood has been able to put out so many products over the years. I mean, the acceleration of growth in their product suite is just insane. Now what they need is customers to cross-sell them to. So although they're acquiring crypto companies right now because they're really high in terms of the velocity of potential growth in revenue and the profitability is huge for Robinhood, they've really cracked that code. But Imagine those customers now needing a place to have their equities, their potential retirement accounts, their options trading, all of these other functions of financial services, and even potentially Robinhood banking going forward in other international markets and cross selling into members that we've already acquired. These were amazing purchases from Robinhood. I'm super excited that Bitstamp is actually finally finalized. And now I can't wait for WonderFi to actually start and see where, as a Canadian, that allows me to become a Robinhood customer down the line. Now, this is not the only, bullish news coming in the next little bit for Robinhood that I think is going to bump up the stock. We also have the potential rebalancing of the S&P 500 coming up, which the announcement will be made June 6th. The actual rebalance will come June 20th. But the last time we saw this was Coinbase stock jumping 25%. From what I can see, out of the companies that are potentially able to join the S&P 500, none of them have the growth, the margins, the cash in the balance sheet with very little debt. I mean, Robinhood seems like the screaming next choice for the S&P 500, and we could know as early as Friday on whether they're getting in. Hopefully, they also see a large 20% jump like we did in Coinbase. But ladies and gentlemen, let me know if you guys also think that Robinhood's going to get to $100. Potentially hit the thumbs up, maybe subscribe down below. Who knows? Up to you. Bye for now.